It's time for RealAg Radio on Rural Radio Channel 147 on Sirius XM. RealAg Radio and RealAgriculture.com is your home for insight and analysis of the issues that are impacting your farm business. Let's get real and get connected with RealAg Radio. Welcome to RealAg Radio here on Rural Radio 147, Sirius XM. Shaun, Haney, your host here on this Friday. Hard to believe it's already Friday, but Friday edition of the show. Hey, thanks so much for making RealAg Radio and Rural Radio 147 a big part of your work day, and a big shout out as well to everybody listening out there on the RealAg Radio podcast. No matter where you are, Canada, the U.S., or beyond, tell your friends, tell your neighbors, anybody that you know is interested in agriculture should be listening to this show. We very much appreciate it. Now, today we've got a RealAg Issues panel. We're also going to be joined by Kristen Razlaff with Corteva. We're going to talk to her in a product spotlight all about Lumiderm and those flea beetles and cutworms and what you can do to take care of them. Absolutely. We're already, fall brings a lot of stuff. Leaves falling, the weather starts to turn, harvest, of course, and hey, it's already time to start thinking about next year, what we're going to plant. And a part of that is the seed treatment package that you're putting on all your different crops. For sure, very, very important when it comes to canola and dealing with those flea beetles and cutworms. RealAg Issues panel today will be Lyndsey Smith and Kelvin Heppner. We're going to dig in on the Conservative Convention. We've got trade ruling that, it depends who you talk to, New Zealand or Canada, who won. Both sides claiming victory. We'll hit on that. The declining popularity of Prime Minister Trudeau. Bank of Canada made a decision this week on interest rates. We got job numbers. We got a lot of stuff. Okay, no shortage of topics here today on the program. Now, you can participate as well. We'd love to hear back from you. This is not just a one-way conversation where you listen and that's where it stops. You can provide us with your feedback, your thoughts, your insights, your perspectives, whether you agree or disagree with myself or anybody else that is on this show. All you have to do is send me an email, shaney@realagriculture.com. You can also find us across all the different social media platforms. What do we got? We got YouTube, Twitter /X, Instagram. We got Facebook, we've got Threads, TikTok. Yeah, I think I got them all. We are Real Agriculture on all of those different platforms. Or you can call the RealAg feedback line. Now, the number is 855-776-6147. Want to remind you to go to realagriculture.com this weekend. We got lots of great stuff we don't get to during the show. Can't fit it all on here. We got lots of great stories, opinion columns, videos, audio, as well as one of the cool things that we now do. We started it going back a few months, is RealAg on the weekend. Now, it is heard in Saskatchewan on terrestrial radio, so make sure you check that out. You can also download the podcast, RealAg on the weekend. Different stuff that you hear this week during the week on this show. And really kind of hone in as a bit of a summary of the week, so to speak. And if you are in Saskatchewan, you can hear it on 650 CKOM or 980 CGME as well. Okay, let's take a break. We got a break, and then we're going to come back. We're going to talk to Kristen Razlaff of Corteva about Lumiderm, and then we're going to get into the RealAg Issues panel. Okay, deal? Let's do it. We'll be right back on RealAg Radio right after this.
At Brett Young, we focus on what's real. It's how we became Canada's largest independent seed company. That's why we're asking a real farmer, what do you think of BY6217TF, Brett Young's TrueFlex Canola Hybrid?
What's that?
BY6217TF, Brett Young's TrueFlex Canola Hybrid with Pod Defender shatter reduction technology and Defender-rated club root and blackleg resistance.
Good yield, yeah. Probably choose it again.
Thanks, Chris. Talk to your Brett Young retailer today to see for yourself. Brett Young, distinct by design.
Dedication. Watching the sunset over your crop is one of life's simple pleasures. The anticipation of it all. We know that feeling. Introducing our new Airflex NXT, our best honeybee header yet with the closest cut ever. Light, fast reacting, and infinitely adjustable. More yield, less time and work. Airflex NXT focuses on the future. What drives your next? Visit honeybee.ca or contact your nearest Honeybee dealer.
Does your N stabilizer contain an active ingredient load high enough to be agronomically effective? If not, it could be costing you time and money. If you're putting down a nitrogen stabilizer, put your trust in Koch Agronomic Services. Solutions like Super U, Tribune, and Anvil. Each delivers high active ingredient concentrations that low-rate products just can't match. Compare how imitator products stack up to agronomically effective solutions at defendyourn.ca.
It's now time for a product spotlight, and I'm joined by Kristen Razlaff. She is a portfolio marketing manager with Corteva, based in Saskatchewan. Kristen, it's great to chat with you.
Yeah, likewise, Shaun. Thanks for having me.
Okay, let's talk about Lumiderm and some of the benefits it provides growers across the prairies who are growing canola. And obviously, we want to get that crop out of the ground as evenly and as quickly as possible. How does Lumiderm ensure that this happens?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think it really comes down to just the breadth of protection that Lumiderm provides canola. So we look at all of the available seed treatments on the market. Lumiderm is truly going to provide the broadest level of protection available. So it provides excellent protection from both flea beetles as well as cutworms for about 35 days. So it provides the most complete pest protection to, really what we know are very vulnerable canola seedlings. And additionally, we see, really year after year, we continue to see the outstanding stand establishment and then improved vigor and biomass from Lumiderm as well. And so really, as a whole, bringing all those attributes together, the result is, not only a stronger and healthier start for canola, but a more even plant stand throughout the season. And that is really what's going to result in a stronger harvest at the end of the year.
Now, we definitely know that there's a number of growers that were impacted in the 2023 growing season by cutworms. They are a pest that can create a lot of damage. How important is cutworm protection when we're considering our seed treatments?
Yeah, absolutely. I think this is, really an important consideration to make. And as we know, cutworms are one of the most significant pests when it comes to canola seedlings. And as you mentioned, in this season, we did see some increased populations in many areas across Western Canada. Beyond that, cutworms are truly unpredictable. They can do a lot of damage in a short period of time, but they are also hard to detect and hard to see in the field. They typically live underground, they feed at night, and so it's hard to understand if cutworms are what's causing the damage, but we'll tend to see wilting plants or plants that are falling over, or even ones that have been cut off entirely. We'll see bare patches in the field that we often attribute to other factors, but it's quite often cutworms that are creating that level of damage and then certainly taking yield from us at the end of the day. So really important to ensure that we are also protecting for cutworms at the same time. Beyond that, if we look at the best way to protect against cutworms, because they are typically underground and typically feeding under the ground, it's really hard to protect them with a foliar insecticide. So a seed treatment is really the best avenue for protection, and a seed treatment like Lumiderm is going to provide really excellent protection of cutworms for those 35 days against all types of cutworms that may be present in the field. And so really a great level of protection. I think a really important piece when we think about peace of mind that are assuring our canola is getting off to its best start and being protected from both flea beetles and from cutworms and getting us through those critical stages of growth and setting our canola up for success.
Super curious, when we talk about flea beetles and cutworms and providing that protection to that canola seed, how does Lumiderm work?
Yeah, that's a great question because Lumiderm is actually, relatively unique in the way that it works. It is a unique mode of action. It is a group 28, and it works primarily through ingestion. So that flea beetle or that cutworm will feed and then ingest the Lumiderm active. And from here, it's a muscle system that is impacted. So those muscles will quickly lose energy. And really what is happening is Lumiderm is stopping their ability to move and to feed and ultimately resulting in that protection from those insects. So as I mentioned, it's a unique group 28. So that protection to that muscle system is different compared to some of the alternative options. And so what we see is that it is actually quite a selective chemistry. It's very selective to that protection to flea beetles and cutworms. So not only providing very high level of protection against those, it is also one that is much kinder to some of those very important beneficial insects as well. So truly, unique chemistry that is very highly effective.
Well, I can identify. That sounds exactly, those flea beetles, that's exactly how I feel after I overeat a turkey supper for Thanksgiving.
There you go, right?
Okay. Hey, if somebody wants more information on Lumiderm or any of the other products that are in Corteva's portfolio, where do they go?
Yeah, so lots of places. You can talk to your local retailer. You can talk to your local Corteva territory manager, or you can look online at lumiderm.corteva.ca. So anything Corteva, we'll have information on Lumiderm, and we look forward to talking to you about it.
Hey, Kristen, thanks so much for joining us here for this product spotlight.
Yeah, have a great day. Thank you so much, Shaun.
Coming up next, we got the RealAg Issues panel. Lyndsey Smith, Kelvin Heppner of RealAgriculture.com standing by, and we'll get to the top issues of the week. Break it all down, agree a little bit, argue a lot, and we'll see where all this conversation goes. You're listening to RealAg Radio, Rural Radio 147, Sirius XM.
Proven Seed is at home in your soil. With the widest seed portfolio in Western Canada, our seed is developed and tested on and for your local acres. Our hybrids and varieties are tested by hundreds of growers, so we know how our seed will perform in your local conditions. Better returns start with seed that belongs where it's planted, and this seed belongs here. Secure your seed today at your local Nutrien Ag Solutions or visit provenseed.ca to learn more.
What's next for your fields? At Pioneer, delivering industry-leading genetics drives everything we do. From the scientists in the lab to our local teams with boots on the ground, we are determined to get there first. Developing top-performing products, proven in more growing conditions than ever before. Pioneer. What's next happens here. Visit pioneer.com/Canada to learn more.
Introducing the Arion 600 Series tractor by Claas, where versatility meets productivity head on, because you've got jobs to do. Mowing, tedding, raking, baling, loading, filling, tilling, cleaning, spreading, hauling, feeding. This is multi-purpose reimagined to do the work for you. It's more than just power. The Arion 600 tractor gets it done.
It's now time for the RealAg Issues panel here on RealAg Radio on this Friday. You want true nitrogen protection? Skip imitator products for an agronomically effective solution like Super U Premium Fertilizer from Koch Agronomic Services. Super U protects against all three forms of loss and is proven to boost yield potential. See how others stack up at defendyourn.ca. Super U. Let's bring in our super panel. Up first, Lyndsey Smith, coming out of Ottawa, Ontario. Lyndsey, how are you?
Well, super, actually. I do love that read. And hey, everybody, I'm back. Did you miss me? It's been days.
Did you have fun hosting the show?
I had so much fun. It's a little stressful. I won't lie. It's a lot of work every day. But, I really appreciate so much feedback. There was just some great emails, some great messages that came through, some follow-up questions, all that sort of stuff. And that makes it, I love talking to all the different people, but also it's great to hear, perspective from someone listening to it, just driving around in their tractor, whatever it might be. So yeah, it was a lot of fun.
Probably
we'll do it again.
Probably a real influx of make sure he doesn't come back.
No, there was not that. But I did get challenged at least once on why there was no sheep content in 2 whole weeks. And so I did show a lot of restraint.
Well, we haven't lost our minds here. Like, what are you talking about? Also, Kelvin Heppner coming out of Altona, Manitoba. Hey, Kelvin, how's it going?
Going well. Doing well here. Great job hosting, Lyndsey, while Shaun was away, and welcome back, Shaun.
It is good to be back. It feels like a regular Friday again. This is back to some normalcy.
When's the last time you missed 2 Friday issues panels in a row?
Yeah, in a row.
Ever?
I
don't think ever. I think so. Earlier today on AgriTalk, I was saying that because I missed 2 weeks of AgriTalk too, and so I said I don't think I've ever missed 2 consecutive weeks of AgriTalk going back to when I joined the show in 2016. So on this show, I don't think it's ever happened. So it was funny. I listened to the panel last week, and you're in your car, you're driving, and I start to argue, and then Trish kind of looks over at me. He's like, "What the hell? What are you doing? Who are you arguing with?" I'm like, Kelvin and Lyndsey.
Yeah, obviously you have more to add. I did wonder if it would be difficult for you. And also, I have to ask, when you got back to your desk, did you feel totally out of the loop?
So not on stuff happening with RealAgriculture, because I did do, I kind of did do some work.
This is where Shaun admits he's not good at taking holidays.
Yeah.
Not good at vacations. Yeah, like good at some things, okay at others, not good at vacations. Anyway, I would admit that I kind of stayed off social media. So I feel a little bit out of the pace of some of the news and stuff like that, probably. But it was a good time away. I got all my kids delivered to university and school, so that was good, and ready to take on fall. Great time of the year. We got hockey starting. We got football started, so that's like that just takes the cake right there. And harvest, right? So it's that time of the year. Speaking of crop conditions, Kelvin, the Western Canadian harvest definitely ahead of schedule.
Yes, that's right. It's ahead of schedule, ahead of last year, and I guess that's kind of the result of drier than normal conditions in most of the prairies, or most areas. Not everywhere, but many areas are drier than normal, and so harvest is moving along, and yields, just like we've talked all year, yields are all over the map, quite variable, like tens of bushels difference, even within the same square mile kind of thing. And so just depending on where that thunder shower lottery fell and just quite variable, sounding like below average, but in some areas better than expected yields as well.
Yeah, it kind of depends on where your expectations were, right? That's a big part of it. And Lyndsey, really, all week here on the show, all I've heard from people out east is, will the corn finish? The crop looks great, but we're going to need some heat.
Yeah, so I was at a field day yesterday with Savita, so got to talk to several different growers, definitely got a sense of where things were at, which is, that's maybe just an hour and a half from my place, but definitely very similar. Talked to a couple growers that hadn't really even started silage yet. They were saying at least 12 to 14 days behind. So if that's any indication, the beans here are just starting just a bit of turning.
Yeah.
So it is behind. I would say, though, I did get a little peek yesterday on some of the yield estimates. And if this corn makes it to the finish line, they're talking, at least for this area, so like Ottawa, Carleton, or Eastern Ontario, they're talking 209 bushels per acre for the corn crop. Like the capacity is there. It's just how long it has until we have a hard frost. Now the forecast looks good. It is not uncommon to avoid frost in September, but it's also not, a sure thing by any stretch. So we shall see. Everyone here, though, really hoping for at least making it to Canadian Thanksgiving, which is Shaun's favorite holiday. So there you go.
Well, Thanksgiving, period.
Any Thanksgiving. It doesn't matter which.
The greatest. If Greece had Thanksgiving, I would celebrate it.
Please be in June. He needs turkey in June.
We need to spread these Thanksgivings out over a wider spread
too
of
many
the year.
in the fall. Yeah. So no, we are definitely behind. Yeah, absolutely.
And significant rainfall. We yesterday we talked to John Weebs Dykstra, dairy farmer from New Brunswick. Yeah, I think he said they've had around his farm like 30 inches in 3 months.
Oh, guys, it's been so I hate to complain, and I know I say that every time, but it's so wet, and we finally got a little break about a week ago where we actually got some hay done. So, that has sort of improved, but it's like every couple days. And then now we just had this heat wave go through, which finally broke today. But guess how it broke, guys? Giant downpour yesterday. So last night into 10 o'clock. So yeah, it's just, so I don't know. The hay quality is going to be the beans are probably going to be super happy. But yeah, there's still mud. The flies are terrible. The bugs are bad. I'm trying not to complain, but I'm complaining because it's really hard on livestock. Let's put it that way.
Let's transition to the Bank of Canada. Made a decision this week to hold the Bank of Canada key lending rate at 5%. It was the expectation. I remember Kelvin mentioned this on the panel last week, that this means that the bank, based on data last week, the Bank of Canada would hold. But Kelvin, the governor gave a speech yesterday. I think it was to the Chamber of Commerce in Calgary yesterday, and he seemed to be kind of hawkish still. So this may be a temporary pause, potentially.
Yep. Some are calling this a hawkish hold. The Bank of Canada has made the decision, or announced this week, that they would not be raising. They're putting a pause on, and that, like you said, was the expectation. But Tiff Macklem, in his comments now after the decision, is certainly creating the possibility, or talking up the possibility, that more increases could come. And I think a lot of this is just psychological positioning. They don't want to raise rates any further. There's certainly been political pressure on the Bank of Canada to not continue raising rates. And I think they don't want to, but he has to talk it up, and talk is cheap. And it's a tool that central banks use as well to influence the psychology of the market as well.
It's interesting. We did, in August, RealAgri Studies did a study on farmers' view of inflation and interest rates. And it was kind of fascinating here. 51% of farmers in Canada extremely concerned about inflation still, and 43% somewhat concerned. So overall, pretty high majority there, at some level of significant concern. Another concern, though, prior to the Bank of Canada decision, we saw Premier Ford in Ontario say, basically the Bank of Canada needs to do the right thing and stop raising rates. And then everybody went all crazy about that level of talk of interference, political interference. Then after they made the decision, Finance Minister Chrystia Freeland came out and say, she basically applauded the decision. Lyndsey, this is something we typically don't see in Canada. We've seen it in the U.S. for a number of years. This isn't kind of political commentary about what the Bank of Canada is doing that we typically hear from members of a current government.
Well, but let's put in perspective who's saying it and their political parties, or where they stand in their governing, because I'm going to say that sounds like a really great way to perhaps make some waves and make some headlines on, what your party and your government is doing to the cost of living, trying to, work it in there that you're absolutely on consumer side, and you're going to do your best as a political party to try and, influence these things and keep this under wraps. I just, when you look at who's saying it, it is becoming abundantly clear whenever, whether it's a provincial or federal election is happening, and we know there's one going on in Manitoba, that the cost of living, inflation, the cost of everything is rapidly becoming sort of the prime focus for anyone who's doing any sort of official or unofficial campaigning.
But doesn't it create confusion in the market, Kelvin, about the role that governments play in what the Bank of Canada is doing?
It does, and that the Bank of Canada and other central banks are supposed to be independent and not influenced by politics, but we know how things work in reality. And I do want to note, it wasn't only Doug Ford. David Eby, the Premier of BC, was actually the first Premier to send a letter to the Bank of Canada saying, please don't raise rates. And he has an NDP government. So it's across the political spectrum, but all these politicians are like Lyndsey said, appealing to voters, trying to gain votes on efforts to keep the cost of living from rising as fast as it has been. There was also Premier Fury in the Maritimes as well, also spoke up ahead of the Bank of Canada decision against this. So yeah, there's politics influencing this or blurring the lines here in terms of Bank of Canada interference, and it's not supposed to be that way. The way the world is going, and we of course have seen Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre over the last year or 2 years even quite critical of the Bank of Canada governor Tiff Macklem and calling for him to be fired. And so there is precedent for this. I don't think the Bank of Canada, as much as they can say they're independent and not taking this pressure into account, I think that it's just like a jury decision in court. How do you keep that outside influence out? I'm not sure you can, at least subconsciously.
Yeah, but
there is. We do in Canada have a political involvement in the Bank of Canada in that every 5 years there's an agreement reached between the federal government and the Bank of Canada on what the inflation target is. They just renewed that deal last year. So there is, from a real high level, there is a political government involvement in Bank of Canada policy. It's just not supposed to influence the month to month or the 8 interest rate decisions. It's not supposed to be at that level of involvement.
I just think that, you're correct on Poilievre, but the hypocrisy, though, is that when Poilievre started to make those comments about the Bank of Canada and the governor, the left side of the flank was like, oh, the outrage. This is silly. This is ridiculous. How you can't comment on these things. They're independent. And it
just shows, though, that the political pressure around cost of living, and like Lyndsey said, how that has escalated up to be the top priority for people right now. And to me, it just shows that takes precedent now over the independence and purity of a Bank of Canada decision.
Yeah. Well, we're going to take a break, but I want to give you one more data point. We asked farmers, has the Canadian policymakers' response to inflation has been very effective? 42% saying completely disagree. So we're going to have more on that study coming out next week, and we'll talk about it here on this very program. Lots of interesting data points as well. Okay, let's take a break. We'll be back with more of RealAg Radio and the Issues panel right after this.
Where do you buy your corn and soybean seed from? If you're a Maizex Seeds customer, the answer is other Canadian farmers. With one of the largest pre-commercial testing programs in Canada aimed at meeting local needs, Maizex offers benchmark performance in corn hybrids and soybean varieties from a company owned by Canadian farmers. Ask your Maizex dealer about the best products field by field for your farm, or visit maizex.com today.
The Advancing Women Conference, the National Leadership Conference for Women in Ag, is celebrating 10 years of bringing women in ag together. Whether you're a producer, student, entrepreneur, representative of grower association, or corporate agribusiness, invest in yourself in Niagara Falls on November 19th, 20th, and 21st. Visit advancingwomenconference.ca for more information and to register.
It was so great to see NFL football back on TV. Like a couple weeks ago, my wife Trish asked me, "Can football really decide what we do on a regular basis? Like, can it run our lives?" I'm like, yeah, absolutely, it can. So happy house at the Haneys last night. The football was back on in prime time, and as a Bears fan, not very happy with how good the Lions look for sure. Hey, Kelvin, you think about doing some fall weed control?
Definitely need to do some. Yes.
Yes, you need to, because if you listen to Wheat Pete, he tells you the best time to take care of some of those pesky weeds is in the fall. And let's talk about pre-emergent soil active herbicides like Valterra EZ and Fierce EZ from New Farm. Get ahead of hard to kill weeds. Spray this fall for up to 8 weeks. 8 weeks of extended weed control next spring. Find out more about New Farm products at newfarm.ca. Okay, Kelvin, speaking of the Bank of Canada from the last segment, this has an impact, or what they do going forward is somewhat impacted by the Canadian jobs numbers, and we've got some new data to talk about.
Yep, StatsCan out this morning with a new jobs report showing 40,000 new jobs created in August. That's about double what economists were expecting. But at the same time, the Canadian population grew by another record in August, 103,000. So we're going backwards there in terms of the employment rate. And so unemployment overall, 40,000 new jobs, 103,000 new people. So unemployment, they say, held steady at 5.5% after rising over the past 3 months. Wage growth, meanwhile, remained firm but slightly lower versus July. 4.9% increase in wages year over year in August, down from 5% in July.
Okay, and watch that unemployment number, 5.5, because that's what a lot of people will focus on in terms of what the Bank of Canada does, right? Need unemployment to go up for them to start to cut rates. And boy, those in Canada and the U.S., the employment number has been very stubborn. Indeed. Okay, Lyndsey, sort of deja vu this week. I feel like we just substituted some of the opposing sides here. But we had a ruling on a trade challenge from New Zealand to Canada in terms of allocation of dairy TRQs under the CPTPP. And some of the market access that countries like New Zealand were granted under that agreement once, and they happily tried to scoop up after the U.S. pulled out of the TPP. Both sides claiming victory. So what do we make of it?
Well, if this sounds like we've talked about it before, it is very similar to what we saw under the CUSMA or USMCA trade dispute as well, where both sides claim victory. Canada does some sort of wording where, you know, they take the few things that were agreed with the Canada side and say, look, we won, and then shuffle out the ones that they didn't win on and just kind of conveniently ignore them. New Zealand, of course, turns around and says, hey, we won, and arguably, as we have found out, New Zealand probably won on the bigger thing. So this all comes down to, just like with CUSMA, the tariff rate quotas. Essentially, the dispute panel said, I believe New Zealand had 5, depending on what thing you read, either 5 or 6 arguments to make on how Canada was dealing with TRQs, basically saying it was favoring domestic processing. Again, does this sound familiar? So the ruling did side with Canada to say, yes, you get to decide how you allocate your TRQs. However, the dispute also sided with New Zealand to say the way that Canada was doing it wasn't actually in line with the CPTPP. So Canada somehow, whether it was Trade Minister Mary Ng or the Dairy Farmers of Canada, are claiming it as a win. I don't really see how it is. I guess the next step, though, is what really changes. So similarly to when we had the CUSMA deal come down, Canada had to go back to the drawing board and sort of put together how it was going to deal with these things. But I don't know that we're going to see a lot of change. And where it goes from here, I don't know. But really interesting to see, you know, just how different sides sort of spin this one, trying to claim victory all around.
Kelvin, do producer groups agree with how Canada is setting the TRQ allocations? Is there any sort of rift there, or are they totally on side?
That's a good question. I'm not sure about that level. This gets real technical when it comes to some of this, and I think the producer groups are always going to fight for their members in terms of protecting what they have for market, not wanting to give it up. But I do think it was telling that Dairy Farmers of Canada said it was disappointed with this ruling. Their DFC has not described it as a win anywhere. And so to me, there is a discrepancy there in terms of your question, Shaun, between the reaction here and Dairy Farmers of Canada's reaction is quite telling. I'm not sure how much longer the Canadian government can continue declaring these wins when the industry here is admitting that they're disappointed with the ruling. And one difference here between the Canada-U.S. ruling earlier this year and this Canada-New Zealand ruling under the CPTPP is the opposing country. New Zealand's dairy industry is quite different from the U.S. in that New Zealand's dairy industry is a massive part of the country's economy. It accounts for 35% of New Zealand's merchandise exports, the dairy sector does, and around 3.1% of the country's GDP. And most of that is through Fonterra, which is a co-op owned by around 9,000 New Zealand dairy farmers. It's the world's largest dairy exporter. Fonterra, according to some reports, has 80% market share in New Zealand, roughly, in terms of the percentage of dairy that they buy. And so that's where Dairy Farmers of Canada is now calling on the Canadian government to investigate New Zealand's dairy support policies and whether there's contravention there of CPTPP commitments and obligations. And so this is where I think this case could be different going forward this scenario or saga around the Canada-New Zealand dairy dispute could be different from the Canada-U.S. dairy dispute. Well,
speaking of dairy, before we move on, got some data this morning from the Senate Ag Committee, put out a chart looking at what's going to happen in terms of net farm income in the U.S. Dairy facing the largest decline, 81% year over year. So really tough times in the U.S. dairy market. There's just no question about that at all. Now, I guess going forward, Kelvin, where does this go from here? Is it basically just a slow play, long play, nothing really changes? Because that's kind of what seems what's happening
on these dairy trade disputes.
Yeah.
Well, there are timelines. Canada and the U.S. filed a subsequent dispute panel challenge, and I believe there's another ruling that we're expecting here in the next couple months. That was from earlier this year under the USMCA or CUSMA North American Trade Agreement. So, and we did see Canada make some tweaks. The U.S. wasn't happy with that. So, yeah, I do think both sides, or the defending side is probably slow playing, and Canada is the defending side in this. And on the New Zealand trade dispute, it does sound like New Zealand is expecting to be able to export more dairy products into Canada. What's the number? It's something like 100 I don't have it right in front of me here, but they do have a specific number that they're expecting to increase their exports to Canada by. So I know yesterday you mentioned John Weeb Dykstra on the Farmer Rapid Fire yesterday. He didn't think there would be many changes at the farm level as a result of this, but there's a 45-day timeline now where Canada and New Zealand have to reach an agreement on what the next steps are in terms of resolving this. So we'll see whether there are changes there at Global Affairs Canada or where those changes need to be made. But yeah.
Well, speaking of other problems,
Canada is going to keep digging its heels in here in terms of giving up more market access.
Well, and all parties will. That's the funny thing about this situation.
Yeah.
Okay, but hang on. It's not giving up more market access. I mean, well, I know what you mean by it, but I want to clarify that. It's about allowing other countries to actually access what was promised in a trade deal.
But was it promised originally? Maybe there's not as much clarity there or agreement there. That's what Canada's defense is here.
Defenses, yeah.
Well, and producers were compensated for that increased access, and so they were compensated for the increased access, and then we're still not allowing the access. If you say there wasn't access given, how do we ever justify the payments that were made in compensation for the access in the first place? You can't have both ways.
Getting saucy. It's getting saucy.
And send me your emails, shaney@realagriculture.com, because that's why I'm so confused. You can't have it both ways.
And to that point, exactly, you can't have it both ways, right? But apparently we're going to try. But to Kelvin's point, this is very complicated. Like, this is international trade. We are talking about, these reams of papers. And when you read through, the actual complaint and all the sections they call on and all that, this is very complicated stuff. And a lot of it could be interpreted a certain way. But Shaun, you make a very good point. CPTPP, and CETA and all that, dairy farmers have been compensated for this increased access, but is it actually being filled? In which case, what were the payments for? So please email shaney@realagriculture.com, and not me this time. Okay, thank you.
Yeah. And hey, to be fair, the thing that happened here too that has really, really rubbed a lot of people the wrong way is that this access under the CPTPP was originally supposed to be taken up by the U.S. Mm-hmm. Okay. And then when the U.S. pulled out of the TPP, then the U.S. said, well, we want that access, increased access through the USMCA. And so then you got kind of a double dip that sort of happened. So, yeah. Hey, quickly, Lyndsey, before break, I was pleased to see groups like SPG, the Saskatchewan Pulse Growers, stepping up $1.4 million to root rot resistance. The threat of Aphanomyces to the pulse acre is very real going forward. And genetics, one of the ways that we get around it.
Yeah, absolutely. So this is the Saskatchewan Pulse Growers has committed 1.4 million, but it's actually a 12.6 or 12.8. It's a very large. It's two projects. One, they're both. This I think is for 4 years. There's one on root rot resistance and one on stress tolerance research. We should add Alberta Pulse Growers and Manitoba have also kicked in some money. So the overall project is much larger. But you're absolutely right. The root rot rots in general have always been a concern for pulse growers, but of course Aphanomyces is the biggest right now, and certainly has in the last few years become a huge challenge for the pulse growers. And so yes, it's a big chunk of change, and it absolutely has to happen because there are definitely instances where if you've got bad enough infection of Aphanomyces, you might be looking at a 1 in 8 year rotation for your pulses. And frankly, in some areas, that's just not going to cut it. So definitely need some help on that side.
I have drone footage from a field of lentils in northeastern Montana. And on the ground, it looked not great. From the air, let me tell you what, it is staggering what that footage looks like. And this was a big reason, this whole topic of Aphanomyces and breeding techniques and breeding results. This was a big push, according to SPG, going back to their annual meeting last January, the Crop Production Show, why they affiliated themselves with Limagrain on that breeding relationship as one of their partners, was to try to find some big world solutions to a big time problem. We got to take a break. We've got more of the Real Ag Issues panel coming up right after this.
If I asked you, what's the most important tool on your farm? You'd probably think of tractors, trucks, and implements first. But it's actually something much bigger than that. Your soil is the most important equipment you own. The real question is, are you doing enough to keep it running at peak performance? Nutrien Smart Nutrition MAP plus MST is engineered with patented micronized sulfur technology to refuel your soil for maximum yields. Learn how to tune up your soil at smartnutritionmst.com.
Introducing the all-new Xerion 12 Series tractor by Kloss. Redesigned from the ground up to redefine the high-capacity four-wheel drive market. With 653 max horsepower, industry-leading hydraulic flow, a silky smooth CVT, a powerful TerraTrack undercarriage, and a quiet, comfortable cab with 20% more legroom. More than just power. The all-new Xerion by Kloss.
And welcome back to Real Ag Radio, here for the Real Ag Issues panel. This segment's brought to you by Granubor from US Borax. Ask for it by name. Go to borax.com. Kelvin Heppner, Lyndsey Smith, Shaun Haney, all of RealAgriculture. Hey, Kelvin, let's hit on the Conservative Party convention or I guess the retreat, or however you want to phrase that happened in Quebec, or is underway in Quebec City. What should we be looking out for?
This is more than a retreat. This is a convention, and apparently it's the largest attendance that has ever been at a Conservative Party convention. Thousands of people in Quebec City. It kicked off yesterday and continues through tomorrow. There are a couple of resolutions on the policy paper regarding agriculture. Nothing really significant, though. One is talking about supporting food security in Canada, and another talking about increasing tidewater access for commodities, including agricultural commodities. And I think that might be a reference to some of the work that's underway in the prairies to expand exports through the Hudson Bay, whether that's at Churchill or a different port. There's been some talk lately this summer about establishing a different port facility on the Hudson Bay. So those are the two agriculture-specific motions that I could find in the policy paper. There's, of course, going to be some larger ones, but it sounds like the Polyev, and some of those are around the social conservative side of things that the media is certainly picking apart. And it sounds like the Polyev leadership group, though, is hoping and has it has things ready for a quiet convention, it sounds like. And then that's probably what would be most successful in terms of not having a lot of fighting break out in it. Right now, the Conservative Party appears to be quite united. You look at the poll numbers. Yep. Some of them show the Conservatives 14 points up on the Liberals now. And so I think then a lot of people are feeling pretty good right now, and likely won't be much fighting happening here.
Okay. Clearly, there's no chance of an election call by the Liberals. Okay, so let's assume that potentially the next election is 2 years out. There has to be some concern in their circles in the Conservative Party that they've peaked way too early.
Yeah, I agree, because you can only be the front runner 14 points ahead without facing, like, the scrutiny is certainly going to be amped up here in the coming months on their policies and on where each individual MP and caucus member stands on different issues. And so, yeah, there's time now. Polyev would like an election called now, taking place today or tomorrow. Yeah, not October 2025, which is the date by when there has to be an election. And it's looking like Trudeau probably will drag his rag the puck until then, because it's unlikely, unless there's a sudden change in events here that turns things around. But right now the polls certainly there's Liberal caucus is expected to meet tomorrow or next week ahead of the resumption of Parliament this fall, which is actually the week after. I said before we went on air it was happening next week. It's the week after that Parliament is resuming. But Liberal MPs are quietly speaking to media off the record right now, expressing quite a bit of displeasure with the leadership right now. And so it'll be interesting to see what happens. Right now, it's just it seems like the Liberal Party is at the bottom of their cycle, or maybe it can go even lower than where it is right now. But yeah. 2 years is still a long time, though.
Yeah, well, and they've been gaining ground based on affordability, and so 2 years out, interest rates could be different.
Yeah, but 2 years is not a long time. We talked about this, was it last week, Lyndsey? 2 years is not enough runway to fix a housing crisis.
No.
It's really not.
No, it's not.
Can I get saucy for a moment? Like on that point, what would Poilievre have to promise to the NDP to get the NDP to pull the rug out from the Liberals?
Pension for Jagmeet Singh, the leader. His full pension, I believe, only kicks in February 2025. So they are, I think they enjoy the leverage that they have right now more than they would actually gain from playing. So right now the NDP have that big red button but they have only one card to play. They have leverage over the Liberals right now in terms of their confidence and supply agreement supporting the Conservatives, supporting the Liberal government. They can, but it's a nuclear option. They can only play it once, and I think they enjoy. There's a thrill in holding. Just like when you have your bin full of canola or corn, there's a thrill in knowing you can sell it, even if you had the opportunity is worth something. And I think the NDP enjoys sitting on that right now.
Yeah, he has more. The party has more power as it sits today than it would if it wasn't in the agreement. So there's got to be a big issue that you're going to be pushing that. You said red button, or is it an orange button? Anyway.
It's an orange button, and it sits on his desk, like 100%. Or I would anyway.
I see it being like 2 feet wide, like a really big button that he has to do like a two-handed plunge on. Anyway. And then like someone gets slimed. Remember
Yeah, you can't do that on television.
Yeah. Great show. Hey, Lyndsey. Oh, what's that, Shaun? Remember that when they were in the lockers? Anyway,
yes,
okay.
Exactly.
CBC had a story this week about temporary foreign workers. And I'll tell you what. Boy, there's extreme commentary and there's extreme commentary. Maybe that's my bias. You'll see what the panel has to say. But a UN special rapporteur on contemporary forms of slavery made the comments in Ottawa that I am disturbed by the fact that many migrant workers are exploited and abused in this country, and made a reference to that it is the TFW program in Canada is a breeding ground for contemporary forms of slavery. Kelvin, what do you make of this?
I think they need to visit a few other farms, and it's this and this reporting too as well. I don't like to be super critical of other reporters and their work, but the experience that I've seen firsthand in terms of temporary foreign workers, they are not in any way being exploited. They come here, they choose to come to Canada because it is their best option for earning an income and supporting their family back home, and they are often treated like family while they're in Canada. So there are bad examples, and certainly that's what it looks like this UN special rapporteur had the chance at seeing, and I'm not sure he saw anything beyond that because, I don't know. Well, did he see anything? Like, is this just like, brother? Like, here's the thing. Have we forgotten what actually slavery looked like? Like, here's the reality. TFWs come here, go back home, and come back. And they earn more than they would at home. Like they choose to come here. Yes. It's not they choose to come here. It's a win-win. And some of this has to do with the discrepancy between the standard of living in Canada and standard of living in some of these countries that they're coming from. There is a discrepancy, or it's not all the same, right. But it's still a win-win relationship in the vast majority of these cases. Not everyone, but the vast majority. Lyndsey, farm groups should be pushing back on this. I'm sure like the fruit and veg industry, horticulture industry just about had a lot of different negative health effects when we saw this article.
Well, and to be sure, to that end, though, I haven't seen a lot yet. This is, of course, a pretty new story, and I'm sure that a lot of them are, getting together and figuring out how to address this. I think, in some ways, if you think about it from crisis communications or how you deal with bad press, those sorts of things. I mean, this is such a blatant sort of, one-sided look at something that you wonder sometimes, do you spend the time and effort to address it? But I think you absolutely have to, because of course it is a sensational headline. It's sensational quotes. And I think it's really important that the industries that and many of our agriculture sectors work with the TFW program and have temporary foreign workers on farm. It's not just fruit and veg. It's not just, meat processing. Even though, yes, there are certain aspects that have more or make use of this program so much more. So I think it's really important that we, as an industry, be more transparent, talk to it. I would highly recommend, there's actually a social media campaign called More Than a Migrant Worker that Farm and Food Care has been involved in. It's a really great way to get to know, the people who work in these industries. I think it's easy to make an opinion based on, one story or one whatever, as opposed to really, I think it's worth digging into this a bit, ask some questions, but I think it really requires that these industries be transparent and talk about this and really introduce people to the people who work under the temporary foreign worker program.
Well, we haven't seen farm groups, at least I have not seen them push back, but the government did. So Immigration Minister Mark Miller made a comment that if an employer fails to meet program requirements or conditions or does not cooperate during an inspection, consequences can be severe. So much need, agriculture and other industries really rely on that temporary foreign worker program. So, and just quickly, it's not just this particular article isn't just a damnation of, using this. It is actually a slight against the government, as in that it's a government program that they designed. So Right. It's not just about the industry. It's the program itself. Yeah. Kelvin, WD-40. Big controversy this week. There was a story out that it was being banned, and WD-40 itself came out. There's getting rid of something getting rid of WD-40 is in the same category as getting rid of duct tape. How would one survive?
Well, John Kowalczyk, farmer from Alberta, who's got a big following on Twitter, he noted that there are probably a fair number of half-empty cans, those that just have a few drips coming out. Most farms have, half a dozen of those laying around. So we do have a bit of a supply if it would go off the shelves. But yeah, WD-40 had to come out with a statement yesterday saying that there's false information circulating online that their products are being banned in Canada. This is not a true statement. There are some regulatory changes taking place, and they've been preparing for them. So WD-40 is still going to be available. Yeah, right there with duct tape. I would add zip ties to that list too.
Oh, yeah.
Zip ties have been quite helpful around here too.
Ooh, go ahead, Lyndsey.
And baler twine, but that's because I have livestock. So same thing. Baler twine is like the poor man's zip tie.
Well,
so there you go.
I'll tell you what I picked up at Princess Auto. If you guys don't have this, it's the new ratchet straps. Remember how they can be so brutal to manage, as you're ratcheting and trying to get them to release. There's new ones where they're push button release. Add that to your list. That's a must.
What if they sit in your truck box for a summer or something and get full of junk and they still work then?
Yeah, well,
I've never seen that happen, Kelvin. Never.
Guys, have faith in the design and the engineer that put it all together.
Right.
Hey, Lyndsey, this has been so much. I'm so glad to be back. This is so much fun. You guys were awesome. Lyndsey, have yourself a great weekend.
Yeah, it's been lovely to have you back. You too.
Kelvin, all the best to you. You're going combining.
Going combining and cheering for the Bombers this weekend after that disappointing result against Saskatchewan last week in the Labor Day Classic. Big Banjo Bowl game tomorrow.
Are we allowed to call it the Banjo Bowl anymore?
Yes.
Yeah, we are. Well, some people are fighting against it. There was a whole controversy.
I forgot.
Yeah. Well,
whatever.
Yeah. There's so many controversies now, you lose track of them. Also, a great week 2 of college football is on tap. And of course, the first full week of NFL football on the weekend. There's a lot of stuff from a sports perspective. And Blue Jays, we are going to get on a roll here and we are going to make the playoffs. We fingers crossed, toes crossed on that one indeed. If you have any feedback on today's show, send me an email, shaney@realagriculture.com. And thanks everybody so much for getting real and getting connected with RealAg Radio. And we will chat again next week. Cheers, everybody.